started. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shilpa Alva, the founder and executive director of Surge for Water, and I'd like to welcome you to current's Chicago Water Week, and especially invite you to Surge's panel discussion about the city of big shoulders and how we are addressing the global water crisis. Before we get started, just a couple of, housekeeping rules. This event is being recorded. And if you would like to ask any questions or make any comments during this event, please feel free to use the chat. We will also have time for Q&A at the end. Our Associate Executive Director, Jennifer Long, is behind the scenes moderating the questions as we go along. So welcome. We're really excited to have such a large audience here today. And again, this is recorded for anybody who has missed it and would like to see it at a later time. So with that, let us get started. To set the context, what is this global water crisis that we're talking about? Right now, at this very moment, there are 2 billion people in the world, actually over 2 billion, that lack access to basic water in their homes. And in this midst of this global pandemic, where we know that washing hands with soap is the most effective way to stop the spread of this virus, there are over 3 billion people that do not have a way to wash their hands in their home. Over 1 million deaths can be prevented every year if communities had access to basic water, sanitation, and hygiene infrastructure. This is where Surge for Water comes in. Surge for Water is a local, Chicago-based, headquartered organization with a global mission. So we're working around the world in the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Philippines, and Uganda to provide education and infrastructure solutions to help solve this issue. So we do things such as building and rehabilitating wells, constructing rainwater harvest tanks, installing water filtration units in homes and schools, and we also do the education programs that tie it all together. Since 2008, we have impacted over 1 million people in 11 countries, even though we're currently active in 4. And in these countries that we work in, we have an approach where we work in communities, schools, and health centers. And we've reached over 300 of these. And along the way, we have also created field jobs. So at Surge, we always talk about the fact that yes, and we can all agree to this, that water is life, it is essential for us to live. But it's not just about water being essential for life, which we can all agree on. It's more important because water allows people to thrive. It allows communities to thrive. So when we're talking about access to safe water, to us, we see the direct correlation that investing in water has on improving education, income, health, dignity, and just the overall opportunities for a community, giving them a chance at a better future. The World Bank did a study several years ago that showed that for every dollar invested in safe water, there's a $3 to $34 return on investment. So being a Chicago headquartered organization, I'm in Chicago right now. Most of our team is based in Chicago. We can't help but notice this beautiful lake that we have. So before I start talking about the Chicago context, we would like to know a little bit about the audience that we have here today, just so we can frame the conversation accordingly. So Jen is going to pull up a poll, and if you could just let us know what industry or which professional area you're in, that will help us with the rest of this conversation. Okay, so we're seeing a lot of corporate responses come in, which is good because this is a corporate focused conversation, but we also welcome all our nonprofit friends and academia friends. Don't see any government representation yet, but all right. It seems like another second or so. Okay, so we have 70% of the votes in. We are predominantly a corporate group today. Some nonprofit Oh, I just realized only I can see these results. Jen, if you can see these, share the results. I had the access behind the scenes. So yeah, we're predominantly corporate, which is perfect because that's the angle. But again, welcome our academia and nonprofit and other category into this conversation too. So with that, I would like to get into this conversation about Chicago and the context of water here locally. So again, blessed to be on the banks of Lake Michigan, which is, as all of you already know, part of the Great Lakes system. And this Great Lakes system is the largest freshwater resource in the world. So we make up 84% of North America's water and 20% of the world's surface freshwater resources. So that alone is this huge blessing. But in addition to having access to all this water, Chicago is also home to two of the largest water treatment plants in the world. The James W. Jardine plant and the Eugene Sawyer plants collectively process a billion gallons of water per day for our neighborhoods. So that is incredible when you talk about like how much water we have here. And at Surge, we're working on solving the global water crisis. And the irony isn't lost on us that we're sitting here with all of this beautiful access to fresh water. There is a conversation that Surge is hosting and is part of tomorrow on water insecurity in Chicago. But today we are focusing on the abundance of water. So having water by itself does not make us experts in this place. So, as we were thinking about this conversation today, and we were talking about like, why is Chicago uniquely positioned to help in solving these big issues related to water? And our anchors for today, Current, who've organized Water Week, they lay this out really nicely on their website. And we thought this was an important piece to bring into our conversation. And then when you talk about why Chicago is important in this conversation, they list out these 5 points. And when you talk about a strong water industry, it's because of all basically the technology companies that are here, the water companies that are here. Chicago is home to 80 headquarters of water and wastewater companies. From a talent perspective, we have all sorts of corporations and professionals who are engineers, water specialists, and other sort of academic professionals, people who can help in this conversation, like visionary leaders that can be part of solving issues. I used to work in supply chain before I moved into this nonprofit world, and I can vouch for the fact that we're highly connected. For the company I used to work for, Chicago was a US hub for transportation globally. So I manage international logistics in this company, and basically because of the rail connectivity and the 2 major airports, Chicago had our biggest distribution facility. So we're highly connected digitally and physically. From an international influence standpoint, we have a thriving immigrant population. We have visionary leaders. Again, I mentioned this a little earlier. We have the 2 of the largest water treatment plants. We're known for our innovation in many areas. And that brings us to having some of the best education and research institutes in the world. So all of these things together make us uniquely positioned to solve something like the global water crisis. And, in coming up with this event name today, even, we wanted to be a little creative about it. And what came to mind from one of our team members was the city of big shoulders. And for those of you who don't know where this came from, it's from a 20th century renowned poet named Carl Sandburg. And he wrote a lot of poetry about Chicago, but this one particular poem was all about the pride. It just beamed with pride of the working class people in Chicago that defined who we were then and who defines who we are now as well. And at that point, the focus was a little bit more on the meat processing and the railroads and how Chicago was pivotal in basically the country's development and progress and how it became this leading city. But today, when we talk about the city of big shoulders in the water context, we can still be, and we still are, that city of big shoulders that has all of this incredible talent, and we can put it to use, and we are putting it to use, addressing some of the biggest challenges in the water space. So we have all of this, but are we philanthropic? And I'm happy to share that the Chicago Community Trust did a study about 5 years ago that, interviewed a lot of Chicagoans. I don't have the specific data, but this is from the Chicago Community Trust. And basically the results of this study showed that Chicagoans give to charity at a higher rate than the national average. So anybody here from Chicago, can feel very proud of that. And if you're not from Chicago and you still give, thank you for that piece. we are more motivated to help when people are in need. And what this meant, they elaborated to say that Chicagoans care more about basic needs. So it is things like food or water, or just like home housing. Like that's what motivates a Chicagoan a little bit more. We give our time as well as our money. And so Surge is a direct beneficiary of the time that people give. We have 3 boards at our organization: an associate board, a governing board, and an advisory board. And it is predominantly made up of skilled Chicagoans who are just working with us in a volunteer capacity to solve the global water crisis. And what was also interesting from this study was that Chicagoans prefer to give closer to home, which is wonderful and much needed. And obviously, we encourage that to continue. However, it makes it quite interesting for Surge's mission since we work on the global water crisis. This is the issue we are trying to solve. We talked about 2 billion people not having access to safe water in their homes. And to help us answer this question and have a conversation about why it's important for an everyday Chicagoan to care. Why is it important for Chicago companies to care about the global water crisis? And what's our role in solving this issue? We have invited 2 very special friends and partners of our organization. Jordan and Stephanie, if you could please switch your cameras on. That Jordan from SBB Research Group and Stephanie Wing from ERM. Welcome to both of you. Please make sure your microphones are not muted as well. Thank you so much, Jordan and Stephanie, for joining me and the Surge team in this conversation today. We invited you to speak about, your own passion to help solve the global water crisis, but obviously in the context of the companies you both work for and why it's important for both SBB Research Group and ERM to work in this area. So with that, let's just get started right away. Jordan, I'm going to start with you. Could you please introduce yourself and obviously provide a context of SBB Research Group and what you do, and talk about high level the relationship that you've had with Surge since 2015.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to talk about our partnership. I'm representing SBB Research Group, which is a Chicago area hedge fund manager dedicated to long-term stability of our investors' returns. But on top of that, we're here today to talk about our focus on philanthropy, both locally and globally. And a great example of that is our partnership with Surge, like you said, since 2015. So I think that's a pretty good introduction of where we're coming from. Go from there.
Yeah, Stephanie, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm also really excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I work with a company called ERM, stands for Environmental Resources Management. We're an environmental consulting firm. I'm located in Chicago, but we do have offices in over 40 countries. So that's really cool that we get to see both aspects of that. I'm an environmental engineer, and I've been here for about 6 years, and we started working with Surge about 3 years ago. Okay. So it's been a really great experience with the partnership with you guys.
Well, thank you both for that introduction. So Jordan, just back to you. Can you build up on that partnership? What have we done in the last 5 years? And I have the numbers in case you need help with that, but would love to hear directly from you what our impact's been, if you can share that with our audience.
Absolutely. So the impact has been really enormous compared to what I expected when we first started together. And I think the numbers are in the thousands, if not tens of thousands of direct impact. So you came to us in 2015, you actually came to our office and made a really compelling presentation about why we should care about water access and hygiene and education in the space. And it really spoke to me for, among other reasons, because I just kind of been living in Ghana for over a year and a direct experience with these issues, and it was really near to my heart. So from there, we spent some time and working with some of my fellow coworkers, drafting different plans to implement, and we identified Uganda as a place that was underserved, which is sort of a core focus of our philanthropic endeavors. So I think we first started with a somewhat microfinance bent toward these water filters that we were delivering to these small sort of remote areas in the mountains of Uganda. And as part of that, we were funding education for hygiene and how to kind of know what is a safe thing to do and what isn't. And then from there, we expanded our projects together. A year later, I believe, maybe 2 years later, and we rehabilitated a water well, which was able to allow access, really close to thousands of people's homes, and really augment the course of their days and make it much safer to access that water. So that was a really big step for us, a bigger project. And then most recently, we've gone into the realm of producing safe latrines for school systems. And the impact of that, which maybe we'll talk about later, is really important too, and a little bit of a different perspective than we initially had when we got together at the beginning. But yeah, over the years, we've had such an amazing impact, and it's great to see a lot of the personal stories from these people who've been affected by this. And so something we're really proud of is how Surge has been able to be so effective and efficient with the capital that we're providing. And that's another reason why we've been really happy with this partnership. It's one thing to write a check, and even if that check is effective, seeing how your organization, which is a pretty small group of people, have such an outsized impact is incredible. And that's your ability to leverage local partnerships on the ground and get buy-in from these communities is something that really jives with our core principles at SBB Research Group.
Thank you, Jordan. I guess I want to add to that when we came to you, we actually hadn't started working in Uganda yet. We're doing very little bit of work. So the trust that your company and you representing the company and Sam and of course others had in us was amazing, right? And that's when you talk about the development work, and it's like trusting the people you work with. You could have been wrong. Fortunately, you were not, and that's why we're still here 5 years later. But if you guys had not invested in us and we were not allowed to do that pilot project, and maybe it would have happened probably later and in a different way, but timing is critical in this. And you invested in us to do a pilot project, and it was that pilot project at that point that impacted actually a couple thousand people from that very first project that has since gone on. And Stephanie's going to come into this conversation to speak as well, but we have impacted 150,000 people in Uganda since that day. And from those 150,000 people, SBB would have impacted 10,000 of those. So that's quite significant. But by the end of this year, early 2021, your number would have gone up to 21,000 people directly and about 100,000 people indirectly. So it's just phenomenal what just having that trust has meant to us, and most importantly, to providing access and addressing the global water crisis. So that just starting off strong, that is amazing, and we're so grateful. So Stephanie, from ERM's perspective, we started working together, as you said, in 2017, and it's just been a phenomenal partnership as well. Please, from your perspective, can you talk about the impact we have made?
Yeah, and we were able to piggyback on at a little bit of a different point, but also in Uganda. So when I first started at ERM, we didn't have any Chicago area partners for our ERM Foundation. So in 2017, you guys had reached out to ERM, and our foundation lead reached out to the offices in Chicago, and I just really jumped at the opportunity. It was really exciting that we'd be able to make an impact elsewhere. At that point, it was just sponsoring your grant application and working through that. But your goals of bringing rehabilitated wells and new latrines, water sanitation and hygiene to schools in Uganda, they really aligned really perfectly with ERM's goals for the ERM Foundation, which they base around the Sustainable Development Goals. I believe there's, 19, 21, 25.
17.
Thank you, 17. I knew it was an odd number. Well, we focused specifically on about 12 of those, from access to water and sanitation, which fits Surge, protecting the natural environment, which fits the partnership, women's livelihoods, also environmental education, of course, and reducing carbon emissions. So we've really been able to kind of attack each of those, I believe, in many different ways over the past 3 years. And I think our numbers definitely in the thousands, but we just did the application last week for our 4th year. And I think we'll be breaking that 10,000 point if we haven't already. Is that right?
If we far from the 10,000, you guys actually, ERM has, by the end of this year, I think we'll be at 30,000 people directly impacted. And that's because we built a toilet at a health center this year, and that toilet serves 26,000 people. So you went from, you had a big jump this year, but it's 30,000 people. And then hopefully, as we continue this partnership next year, I mean, between both of your companies, 2 Chicago-based partnerships, we're really talking about how we're solving this issue in the remote part of Uganda, in Kabarmaito and Kalaki, these districts in northeastern Uganda. So, Stephanie, so were you going to add to that? Was there anything else?
Oh, no, not really much after that. I just, it's really been incredible to see the impact and just be a part of it. And it's something that a lot of people in our office, at least specifically, care about. And I think that really goes out into other offices. You know, it's not just the Chicago area offices that are rooting for this partnership to continue. The fact that we were able to do some COVID relief over the summer, that was trickled all the way through London. And I think it really speaks to the strength of the partnership that we've created with you guys, and what we've been able to do in Uganda, that was an option. And it's just been really great to be a part of.
Thank you both. So I guess my follow-up question for both of you, and we could start with Jordan here, is, there are a lot of worthy causes out there. Right? We just, early on, I showed the study from the Chicago Community Trust about philanthropy and the fact that Chicagoans give, and there are so many things to give to, right? I mean, especially right now with what's happening in the country, like elections, and there's many worthy causes, and we believe in many of them, because when we talk about water, that's just one of the avenues to fight for justice, right? Because there are many ways to fight for justice and fight for equality, and water is one of them. So I'd want to hear from you, and from both of you. We start with you, Jordan, of why was water important to SVB Research Group?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as you alluded to, there are so many different things that we would like to put our resources into. And it is a tough decision sifting through all these opportunities. But when you came to us and presented, this water issue globally, the billions of people impacted by this is just a scale that is hard to imagine. And generally speaking, we try to attack issues that are smaller in scope, because those tend to be the issues that, our dollars can go further. So it was really important for us to see that even though this is a massive problem that maybe is being addressed by other organizations, that you had a novel way of doing things that would allow us to both feel like we're doing more than just writing a check. We could have some insight into why we're doing things and the selection of projects, but also to see that impact was profound, and that, we're meeting the issues faced by really underrepresented people in the world. And a great example of that was our selection of the initial country that we wanted to work in. And I remember back in 2015, when we were talking about where to go, and, we were talking about Haiti and the Philippines and Uganda. And for us, it's important to have, like I said, the biggest impact that we can. And you said, well, wow, yeah, Uganda, we've got nothing going on. They're facing challenges, maybe not worse than other places, but maybe more unmet by other organizations. And so that was a really important trait that led us to be involved with you. Now, I don't want to suggest that we chose to get involved with you at the expense of someone else. We're fortunate that any employee at SVB Research Group is able to take on a particular organization, philanthropic group as their own, and then get appropriate resources, assuming that it meets certain relevant benchmarks and things like that. So the novel thing about your organization that met so many of our goals was, one, the outsized impact, but then two, that we could be involved on a sort of personal level. And then, beyond that, the long-term strategic thinking and the leverage of on-the-ground partners to really have that outsized impact. I mean, at the time, I think it was you, and you might have been the only full-time person in the organization.
I wasn't even full-time when we met.
Exactly.
I still had a day job, I think.
Right. So seeing how you were able to do these projects with such a limited budget, the efficiency with which you could operate was really impressive. And that was one of the main factors as well. So I think there's a lot of organizations that touch different areas differently, and you spoke to us through those ones mainly. But we've been really happy with every aspect of this partnership. So it hasn't been a hard choice in many years. I'll say that.
Thank you, Jordan. And Stephanie, yeah, why does, I mean, I think you alluded this to a little bit earlier as well, that working on water solves this, but how does working on safe water fit into the other philanthropic objectives of ERM?
Well, it really fits right in. I mean, especially with just ERM as a whole being an environmental consulting company, that's of course going to be very important to us. Their tagline is the business of sustainability. So it's like, it really runs right in. Anything, as you said, water is life. And I mean, it runs through everything that you need, right? So in the goals that we have, it's within environmental education, it's in protecting the natural environment, and of course within safe water and hygiene. And it really just fits right in. The ERM Foundation has been around for 25 years, and the first ever grant award was actually for a water program called Water for People. And safe water programs have remained a key focus for the ERM Foundation through the years since then. So the ERM Foundation, a little bit about it, it's not a corporate foundation. It's actually funded entirely by employees and then matched by ERM. So it's funded by ERM employees, and it's also managed by ERM employees. So we're able to kind of channel what the ERM employees also are wanting to do. So the ERM Foundation actually put out a staff survey a couple of years ago to understand what areas were deemed most critical, and once again, safe water access emerged as one of those key focus areas. So it just really continues to be very important to ERM and the ERM Foundation and the employees within who are really leading that charge, as well as the sustainable development goals that ERM Foundation has chosen. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that perfectly answers it. I mean, and obviously we're working in the space, so we understand the transformational change that water can make. And I think it's important for our audience to just hear from other perspectives why it was important to you. So, just a little bit of a personal question here, because we talk. Today's talk is about Chicago-based companies, but also everyday Chicagoans. And both of you live here. This is your city, like it's my city. And so what have you learned about water insecurity, whether it's local or global, through your involvement with Surge, hopefully, and have we helped raise your awareness of water insecurity? Do you have a different relationship with water now? Or do you still leave the tap on running and leave and go do something else? Has that changed? I'm just interested to hear something that happens every day in your life. Have your choices become different? Jordan, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think it would be hard not to change some of my thinking around some of these things. The statistics are staggering. You see a lot of headlines, Flint, Michigan. You see a lot of things all over the world, but locally as well. And I think obviously you're a little bit more careful about, how long is the shower? How am I doing my dishes? Things like that. But, in general, I think the awareness, not just for me, but for my organization, my friends and family who I talk about this with, the impact is there as well. And I think just even if you aren't able to make specific adjustments to your lifestyle to address this issue, just being aware of it and talking about it and raising the thoughts of other people around this issue that might be able to have impacts themselves is really important. So I think absolutely the answer to your question is we've definitely changed our thinking, and I know I have personally at least, and it's really important.
Sorry to put you on the spot. Do you have any actions that you can share that someone at home can do? Is there something tangible that someone you can think about it if you want as I go?
For me personally, a great example is I'm one of those people that just has a cup of water with me at all times, and I might be cycling, lots of different cups when I don't really need to, and I'm putting a bunch of extra loads of dishwasher together, and so something that this is a pretty minor thing, but it's you asked. So I've been trying to use the same cup over and over, and then obviously after a certain period of time, dirty, I got to deal with it then. Don't worry about I'm being hygienic, but little things like that I know are maybe silly because they're such a small level thing, but I think, you know, in aggregate with a lot of different people doing similar behaviors, there is an impact, and maybe not so much in Chicago, but places like California, places that are having more, you know, water related issues, even in the first world, there's things that can be done.
Yeah. And I think the most important thing with taking these actions is that your mindset starts to change, right? So if you're conscious about it, whether you start with a glass and then it turns into like your water footprint, and like what are those choices you're making, the virtual water, into the clothes that you buy, like, so it can, the things you eat, right? So there's a whole conversation there when you talk about water security. So Stephanie, from your perspective, has your relationship with water changed since you've started working with us and like understanding this crisis even more?
Yeah, absolutely. As an environmental engineer, this has been something that's been important to me for a long time. I had an internship at a nonprofit a long time ago. It has really developed over the years. And particularly with Surge, it's kind of like you said, it's been such a mindset shift. Even though that mindset was absolutely put into place a long time ago, it's really grown even further into learning the perspective that of what other people are experiencing in the same world that I live in. And I really do feel that that impacts, just like Jordan said, my everyday life. Every little piece you do, it reminds you that there are other small pieces that you can do. And it makes it easier to talk to other people about the issues, because, you know, a lot of people, they hear the numbers, the staggering statistics of how many people are without safe access to water and clean water. But our partnership has really given me the opportunity to learn faces to those numbers. And that's just so different. It's just, if you don't know the stories, it's not as meaningful. It doesn't stick to you as long. Like when I see a picture and hear a story of a latrine that's just like in such horrible disrepair, yet students and teachers in the same world as me have to use every single day because that's their only option, or young girls that skip school for a few days every single month because they don't have clean facilities, for example. Putting a face to those numbers and seeing those stories, it just has really, really shifted the way I look at the issues and also the way I talk about them. So it's got a personal impact on me. It inspires me and changes my motivation, but I think it's also really changed how I speak to other people about it. I can just make such a bigger impact, whether that's helping something as small as someone turning a faucet off to changing their mindset, or, you know, getting more people involved and interested in the ERM Foundation. It's all just kind of pulled together, especially over the last 3 years since working with you guys. So it's made a big impact on me, and I think at least in the Chicago area in ERM. So
I mean, that's to both Stephanie and Jordan. Like, I think we've actually never had this level of conversation about this before. So it makes me really happy to hear that. Because when people ask me as a founder of this organization, like what motivates me, I always come back to exactly what you said, Stephanie, those stories. And Jordan, you mentioned this right in your opening, that you love reading the stories. And that's, I think, when you talk about 2 billion people, that's so overwhelming, right? So when you focus that down onto each of us, right? Like Stephanie, your actions that you're taking, Jordan, what are you doing? What am I doing? That makes it very tangible. And, you know, I'm just going to take this point. I wasn't going to do this, but I think it's important just to set this context, like a story from the field. And this could have been in either one of your projects. I just remember it as a water source, but we rehabilitated this water source in Uganda, and I was there for a few days after it had been fixed, and the community just gathers. I mean, truly, you know, even look at in non-COVID times, the lakefront is full in the summers, right? Like water is a gathering point wherever you are in the world, especially if it's fresh water. That's not true. Beaches, saltwater beaches do well as well. Water is a gathering point. And so the community had gathered together at this watering point. Everybody's singing and dancing and celebrating, and we're just enjoying this life that this water has brought into the space. And a village elder came to me, and he's in his 60s or 70s. His name's Ivuku Moses. And he says, you know, thank you so much for bringing water back to our communities. Thank you for bringing life back into our communities. But then he says to me, but most importantly, thank you for helping me feel like a human being again. And this is a man in his 70s who basically then goes on to tell me that he used to be on his knees drinking water from the same source as the pigs and the cows, and he did not feel like he was dignified. Like, he's a village elder. He's like one of the most respected people culturally in this village. And he did not feel dignified because he had to like scoop up dirty water from the open spring. And that's what these stories about. And so every single time you do even a small action in your daily life, as an everyday Chicagoan, as a company, there's so many different levels you can make this difference. It's so important to be reminded of these stories. And if you don't know these stories, come visit Surge, follow us, because we share these stories all the time. And they're not people somewhere far away. This is part of our community, our global community. So with that, to transition to another question, and there are a lot of corporate there's a lot of corporate audience on here, and this is recorded because we'll be sharing it with other companies we work with. Employee engagement is a big deal to a lot of companies these days. It's known that it's important to engage your employees so you can retain them and that you can make them feel satisfied in their work and just, that overall morale of your company culture. So if Jordan, you can start, like, how has your company engage with Surge and like have employees been involved, obviously beyond yourself? And is that important to SBB researchers, I guess, philanthropic giving, CSR?
Yeah, absolutely it is. In fact, it's sort of the core of our program. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but the way it works with us is, every employee, is eligible to take on an organization as their, as a champion for that organization. And only through that process is SBB Research Group going to provide capital to that. But it's more than just like, oh, I'm Jordan and I like Surge, let's write a check. The requirement is you need to be involved beyond just, here's a cool thing that you can do. And the reason for that is not just simply to make it harder to write checks, but it's because it's about more than writing the check. It's about being engaged with it and sharing your experiences and what you're learning, so we can all be more aware and more conscientious about the world and about our local areas and the problems that many different types of people face. That diversity is important. And so at our company, over the years, I've cycled through different coworkers who have worked with me on some of these projects and reviewing the documents and the plans. And it's been really fun bringing them in and explaining, what we're doing here and why, and what are the effects of this, and what are the secondary effects of this and tertiary effects. And it's really cool to see the eyes kind of open wide and say, wow, this is amazing. And it doesn't just apply for this specific project and water access, but it's like, wow, there's so many great things that can be done to change the people's lives in so many ways you would never expect. And just by being involved and being thoughtful and putting in a little bit of your own time can really have a major impact.
Yeah, and that's really important to us, right? Because we know that in order to build a lasting partnership with an individual or a company, you need something more at stake than just the check. The check's very important, so we're grateful for that, and we're happy to accept that. But if we have the check and engagement, that's another level. So with that, Stephanie, with you and the ERM team, you guys have had a lot of hands-on involvement, from like skilled support with the environmental training. You've actually been to, I know Jordan, the SBB team has been to our galas, but ERM has also come to World Water Day events, menstrual health events. Just can you talk a little bit about that and your experience with it? And your mics, yeah, you got your mic.
I like to mute it in case I breathe really loudly. Like you said, the volunteering event, one that really sticks out to me is the World Water Day one that I went to a couple of years ago. I'm not sure how much people may know about that on the call, so I'll give a little.
Yes.
I'll give a little background. Basically, me walking into it as essentially an outsider, hadn't been there before. It's really catered towards students and teaching them what essentially their counterparts, other students and children, are experiencing in other parts of the world. And it was just made a really big impact on me, because seeing students, learning firsthand and for the first time really what other children are going through in other parts of the world that they have to walk for water, or that they don't have a running water, or that they don't have a toilet that flushes, or a dishwasher, all these things that, you know, as a 7-year-old, you think that's like that everywhere. And just to see the compassion from these children and all the passion that they had to learn more about it. And there was just so much kindness in the room. And it was just, I don't know, it really made a big impact on me. And I ended up talking to my coworkers about it the following week. And I think so much of this really just relates back to what I mentioned about the mindset shift and gaining perspective. And it really just does the same thing every time. As far as ERM's engagement, we have Foundation Week every year where we always, in the Chicago area, we do talk about our partnership with Surge for Water. And I always have people asking so many questions, and they're so interested in what they can do to help, or, you know, what are we doing and why are we doing it that way, or what are the needs of other people in the world. And what's interesting about this partnership is oftentimes ERM Foundation partnerships, only one person sponsors them. And over the years with different staffing, we started with a 4-person team, which moved to a 3, and then went back to a 4, and now it's back to 3. We have people in San Francisco. That person was previously in London, previously in Chicago, someone from Salt Lake, now in Charlotte, and here in Chicago. So people at ERM have just been really, really interested and engaged in trying to get involved with Surge, because I think they just really identify with wanting to make that impact that Surge really values so much.
Well, thank you. And then I just want to elaborate. So the program that Stephanie is mentioning and talking about is called Water, the Global Passport. And basically what we do is we take students through basically an experiential learning. So you come into this journey and you get a passport, and your passport would be from the Philippines or from the US, from Uganda or from the UAE. And basically you have the challenges that a child in that country would be facing. So we play games like the race for water. And if you are from a country that you'd have to possibly walk long distances to collect your water, you will then get your jerry can and you're carrying that water to play all the games, or you will have a baby strapped on your back, you know. So we simulate these things in a game-like environment, so children can understand. And what I always think is amazing is not only the children that learn, it's all the adults in the room, because we partner with corporations to deliver this program. So Stephanie was representing ERM when she came, and the adults are like, wait, what? We use that much water? Like, that doesn't seem possible. So it's just a really fun, there's acting, there's singing, there's running. And yeah, we can't wait to get back to some of that programming when in-person stuff is allowed. We even talked earlier about like habits that you guys, you know, things that you could change personally. And a big part of that discussion too is understanding your local water footprint, understanding your watershed. So that kind of, you know, things that are happening in Water Week this week as well, like understanding our watershed. Like, what does that even mean? Like, your water is, yes, coming out of the tap, but where is it coming from? Just, you know, while I was preparing for this call, I just want to share that, you know, even though I talked about this abundant water that we have in Lake Michigan, it's not unlimited. There are limits on the amount of water. So it's only a certain percentage of Illinois that can get water. And because we've redirected our rivers away from Lake Michigan for pollution issues early on in this, like, I don't know how many years ago, but a while ago, we now have more limits on the water that we can take out of Lake Michigan. So it's not unlimited. So just things like that are really important in these ways to engage employees in these programs. So I know we've about 15 minutes left, and I'm just going to ask you guys one more question, then open it up to our audience to see if there are any. So I'm just going to prompt anybody who wants to type in a question in the chat, please do so now, and we'll be sure to get to it. So the last question for me, for both of you, is just in general, when you're talking about philanthropic goals for your organizations, like, what are some of the challenges you face? Because this has been wonderful that you're talking about these wonderful things that Surge is doing, but what should people look for? Like, we've obviously built successful relationships, but you know, and you don't have to obviously talk about bad partnerships, but what are the challenges in trying to find a strong philanthropic partner, a strong corporate social responsibility partner? And, you know, what does success look like, just in general? So Jordan, if you'd like to start.
Well, I can give you a broader answer, but I'll start with the more specific challenge that I think everyone is facing right now. And, obviously COVID has changed our ability to be active and on the ground. I mean, prior to COVID, it was a big part of our culture to be involved with local charities, and typically on a monthly basis, as a group of employees, we would go and do something locally. But as a result of the COVID situation, that's not possible. And those challenges are met with opportunities. So something that we developed as a response was this grant program where we're inviting local, they don't have to be local, but typically local philanthropic organizations to come and present each month. And then we award a grant based on all the employees' vote on what they think is the best opportunity. And so we maintain that engagement in the face of some of these challenges, but on a more general level, we do have a set of rules for organizations that we can be involved with. But and I think those are probably typical to most companies, limitations on political or religious elements. But as far as metrics go and how we evaluate the different groups that we work with, it's important to have a qualitative aspect to this. So an example, we do work with World Wildlife Fund, which is a large organization, and it's hard to imagine us having such a significant impact like we do with you with such a large organization, but we find elements within these groups to have an outsized impact. And the way we measure that is not always the same group to group, but so that's definitely a challenge that we face when we're evaluating our opportunities. But at the end of the day, if we're as employees, as people interested in solving these problems, then it's on us to make the case to our coworkers and to our leadership that this is a worthy endeavor. And through that responsibility, I think we've ended up with a pretty solid portfolio of relationships with really great folks like yourself. So that's a little bit about how we've dealt with it.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Yeah, one of the challenges that ERM has is just that because we are employee funded with the ERM match, the ERM Foundation just generally is not a large funder. So with that being said, ERM, especially in the past few years, the foundation has really focused on developing more long-term partnerships, such as the one with Surge, so if you ask what a success looked like, I think that this is a really great example, and I definitely don't think I'm the only one who would say that. So, that's really just probably the biggest challenge we work with, that we kind of need to be a bit choosy. As far as evaluating the applications, I'm also a grant reader, so I do read other applications that come in, and we have a certain system that we review them on. One of those is actually being, how is the community also inputting on this goal? You don't want to just throw money at a place because then there's no ownership of it. And so that is something that ERM really values. There's also, ERM Foundation kind of tries to stay away from, single events and one-time events or like a sponsorship. While those have value for a smaller funder like the ERM Foundation, they're just not really what they're looking for in order to achieve those sustainable development goals that we've targeted. But other than that, I think we have pretty meaningful impact.
Well, I thank you both for that. And I think what's important, like that I'd want to add to what both of you have just answered is, again, we talk about this global water crisis being so large. And what we wanted to share here today is that we're not an org that's out there, maybe in New York or something. We're right here in Chicago, in your backyard. Like Surge for Water in non-COVID times, is on the L. We're going to the same lakefronts, right? We're on the 606. We're at the same grocery stores. And I think that's important because I think when you reduce the barrier of this global water crisis and you understand that you're working closely with someone like myself, like Jen, like others in our organizations who are traveling to the field, working hand in hand with our partners, our work still continuing without us being physically there, but it's a closer relationship. It really shows the power of having, a Chicago-based organization making this difference, and Chicago companies and people living here. And I think that's a really powerful story. So please, if anybody has questions, please type them into chat. I do see one from Dan from GHD. Stephanie and Jordan, I think you can see it as well. It says, does Surge or donors, which would be both of you, have a philosophy about water projects, about how water projects should be funded going forward? Should they be self-sustaining, or do they need multi-year commitment for one or more charitable organizations or donors? Would either of you like to address this? And then I'm happy to add my comments in.
I'm happy to start, but I feel like I've been starting a lot.
That's just been our rhythm. We're good.
All right, I'll start. So I think ideally you want something that is self-sustaining. That is a part of the qualitative set of metrics that we look at is, is this a one-time thing, which can be great and extremely important. And an example of that is our most recent project included this kind of COVID education element with the radio programs to disseminate accurate information. But that's hopefully not going to be something that's required, forever. So I think there's value to these sort of one-off projects, but ideally, when we look at funding a project with any organization, but especially in the water realm, you do want something that's sustainable. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're having to continually, pump, for lack of a better word, capital into these same issues, then it's something that's not right with it. But that being said, I think, at least from my perspective, it's a case-by-case issue. And certainly, the fact that something might not be as sustainable may weigh against the other benefits of the same, project. So it totally depends, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Yeah, and my answer for that kind of echoes what I had mentioned in the previous question, just that I really, truly agree with Jordan as well, that self-sustaining ability, once you get that partnership started, I think ERM Foundation and I personally believe that it should really be a partnership with the community that you're trying to help, rather than the community not having that ownership at all and any stake in it. Essentially, they should be a stakeholder in the changes they want in their community. And I think that you can kind of start really big with a lot of hand-holding, and as you teach a community or you have an environmental education piece like we have, they are able to then spread that in their own community and teach all the people throughout there how to protect the environment, or why not to drink water that you didn't clean first. That has such a larger impact than I can ever have, than the ERM Foundation can never have, than Surge can ever have, because that is their day-to-day life. It is education at its best when we can help them with that seed, essentially. And I really, truly think that is the best way for any water project to be funded, is to have it be a partnership with the community that is in need.
I think you guys are definitely the best possible speakers we could have representing Surge, because you're really sharing our model in your answers. And I'll add to that just a little bit more technical stuff for Dan's question. So we do believe that the project should be self-sustaining. So the way Surge does our work is we identify a community. That community could be a little village, right, that has 1,000 people or 300 people, right? There's a range. And that's their water source. So we will go in, but when we do that water source, the very first step is to mobilize that community so that they are owning their own transformation. And we only strengthen existing capacity. It already exists. So when we build that water source, actually we don't build it, when we work with the community to fix that water source, to build that water source, they form a water user committee. And that water user committee is responsible for everything before, during, and most importantly, after. They even charge their users a certain fee so that when something breaks down, they are able to go back in and fix it on their own. So we are not pumping money, to use Jordan's into the same source. They are expected to do it, but we provide the education and the infrastructure and that model so that they can thrive. So we're not just going and building a well and walking away. And then what we also do is we go back and we do periodic water user committee trainings. We're doing well technician trainings coming up in the future. So it's like we're training the skills so that the capacity stays within the country so that these communities are no longer dependent on surge, any donor, any foreign organization, because that is not okay. It has to be from within. So just, yes, Dan, we all agree that it should be self-sustaining. I want to see, well, actually, I'm very sorry, Courtney. I'm happy to answer that question offline. I just want to be respectful for the time here since we only have 2 minutes left, but we'll get back to you privately on that question, which is, how do we partner? I would love to answer because it's an important question, but we definitely avoid duplication of efforts is what I would say. With that, thank you very much, Jordan and Stephanie, for your time here today. We are incredibly grateful for the partnership. And just for you both being beautiful ambassadors for our global work and for showing how Chicagoans can make this difference. I would like to end with a couple of slides, a little bit of plugs of things that we're going to have happening. You can get involved with Surge by partnering with us like Stephanie and Jordan have done through their companies. Obviously, you can donate. We have an entirely volunteer board. So if you're interested in that, you can reach out. We're going to talk about events in a moment. When travel's back up, please join an impact trip and follow us online. Just be an ambassador, a voice. Like that's the easiest thing to do these days. Jan, if you can move on to the next. It's not that expensive I should say it the other way. It's actually very cheap to make a difference in the water and sanitation space. Something as low as $100 provides an education class, or at the high end at $7,000, you can do a toilet. And we've been talking a lot about the well fixes. That's at the 3,000 limit level. And I mentioned events. So there are 2 that are coming up. This one, our Dance to the Decades that SBB Research Group is actually a decade sponsor of, is not your average Zoom call. We have a comedian host, professional dancers, mixology, gourmet dinner. We're partnering with Tao, so you can get dinner right in your homes if you're in Chicago, a silent auction. It is free to register. It's a really fun event. We're going through the 20s, 50s, 70s, and 90s. The link is right here. Search for water.org /dance. So please sign up. It's a way to continue the conversation with us. And the other event that I would like to share is tomorrow. We've hosted, but it's being moderated by Kevin Sofin, a friend of ours, a panel to talk about water insecurity and what that looks like locally. So today we talked a lot about abundance of water with Lake Michigan, but not everybody has equal access to this lake. And we really want to talk about environmental and systemic injustices that are happening that prevent communities, both here in the United States and the Midwest, as well as globally, from having access to life's basic needs, such as safe water. The last one should probably be my information. Yes, it is. So with that, thank you, everybody. Thank you again, Jordan and Stephanie. We are deeply grateful. And Courtney, we'll get back to your question offline. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.